One of the most important things that we can manage with our fantasy football roster is having the depth to get us through the middle portion of the fantasy season. Guys are getting banged up, bye weeks are happening right now, and we're going to need to replace some starters for the next couple of weeks, but we want to make sure that we have the guys in place so we don't take too many losses throughout this time frame. Are there some guys on the waiver wire right now that can help you out with that? Absolutely. Let's take a look at our waiver wire targets for week 6. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Week 6 is approaching, and that means we're like halfway through the fantasy season right now. Bye weeks are on us, and because of that, we need to make sure that we have the depth to work our way through the next several weeks so we can make sure that we get the best possible seed in the fantasy playoffs. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and let's talk about some waiver wire targets you should be going after for your roster this week. I brought up Jaleel McLaughlin last week, and in my start and sit video, I even mentioned that there is a possibility he has taken over as the RB2 in Denver. And with Javonte Williams being inactive this week, McLaughlin put up almost 100 total yards and scored a touchdown. It absolutely feels like he is unseated P. Ryan at this point. He needs to be on as many rosters as possible, and if Javonte Williams doesn't become active very soon, McLaughlin also might be a guy that we're starting for the foreseeable future. Pierre Strong Jr. and the Cleveland Browns are coming out of their bye, and this isn't a guy that we're adding right now, but we're continuing to keep an eye on him after his last game, seeing a large increase in his touches and snap percentage. He might not be a guy that's taking over as the starter right now, but if Jerome Ford continues to be inefficient, you could see Pierre Strong make a run until Kareem Hunt feels like he's ready to go with the full workload. Over the last 2 weeks, Chuba Hubbard is averaging over 50% of the offensive snaps at the running back position. He is starting to see an increase in his workload. And one thing Miles Sanders isn't seeing is an increase in his performance. Chuba Hubbard is trying to make a case to be on the field more often, and that is currently happening. Is it because Sanders has been banged up? Is it because they were in such negative game script? Well, given the Carolina record and how they've been playing so far as a team this season, being in negative game script might be something that we continue to see. So in PPR leagues, if Chuba Hubbard continues to make a case to be on the field in passing situations, he could become a flex option in the coming weeks. Khalil Herbert has played really well in back-to-back performances, but now he's expected to miss several weeks with a leg injury. Roschon Johnson, who everyone has been stashing, waiting for this to happen, is dealing with a concussion and may not even be able to go this week. Dante Foreman is the guy that we need to be taking a shot at, because if there's no Roschon Johnson and there is no Khalil Herbert, then there's going to be a lot of Dante Foreman in the run game. At worst this week, he would be like a low-end RB3 type flex option for you. But with all the volume that he's getting, we definitely need to be adding him, especially if we're dealing with any bye weeks. For the Baltimore Ravens, Keaton Mitchell is a guy to keep an eye on. I don't think he's taking the starting job in Baltimore anytime soon, and he's even still on the IR right now, but I got a couple of questions about him this week and wanted to make sure that I included him in the waiver wire video in case anybody was thinking about potentially grabbing him. If you really want to try and stash him, you're more than welcome to. It's not like Justice Hill and Gus Edwards have been out of this world good so far this season, but they've been just good enough. Will Keaton Mitchell see some snaps once he comes back from the IR? It's possible, but it would take a really big downfall or injuries to Justice Hill or Gus Edwards to make Keaton Mitchell fantasy viable. Emari Demercado from the Arizona Cardinals could see a significant presence in the backfield if James Conner's knee injury ends up leading him to miss any time over the next couple of weeks. This guy kind of came out of nowhere this past week and had a pretty decent game after James Conner left early on. 45 yards on 10 carries and a touchdown, and this week he's going to be getting the LA Rams, which isn't that easy to run on. But if you're a James Conner owner and you're already short at the position, then you're definitely going to want to grab his backup early in case he can't go against the Rams this week, or maybe he's even limited. Elijah Mitchell is hurting once again, and that led Jordan Mason to being the backup for Christian McCaffrey against the Dallas Cowboys this week. Now, listen, Jordan Mason isn't going to run like he did over the Cowboys late in the game, and he got quite a bit of touches after Christian McCaffrey, and a lot of the starters started to come out at that point. But it's always a good idea to keep an eye on the Christian McCaffrey backup because you never know what what could happen. He's still being used a lot on the ground. Now, I will say for the 49ers, they're doing a pretty good job of still keeping a nice control on his touches, so he's not being overused. But that doesn't mean that he still isn't taking a lot of big hits right now, and because of that, having the backup is always a good idea. Jordan Mason isn't anyone I'm picking up unless I own Christian McCaffrey, and then if you have an extra roster spot, it might be a good idea to hold on to the backup. And also, a side note on that, with the way San Francisco is playing right now, there's a really good opportunity for them late in the season to have a couple of games where maybe they end up resting their starters because they've run away with maybe the #1 overall seed or at least the division. And because of that, if we are still in the fantasy playoffs then and you're a CMC owner, you're gonna want to have somebody to replace him in your lineup, and having his backup wouldn't be a bad idea. Jaylen Warren is going to be heading into a bye with the Steelers this week, but it is crazy to see that he is under 50% owned on almost every major platform right now, because he shouldn't be, especially in PPR leagues. He's outplaying Najee Harris right now, and while his ceiling isn't that great, he's giving you a decent floor in PPR leagues as a flex option. If you're dealing with issues of depth at your running back position, Jaylen Warren should be added. Even if you're not playing him every single week, if you find yourself with an emergency option and need to go with him, you could do a lot worse in the league right now. Moving on to the wide receiver position, Trey Palmer and Devin Tompkins for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Mike Evans has had a bye week now to kind of rest that hamstring and hopefully get back on the field and not be limited going up against Detroit this coming week. So if he's not limited, it doesn't do you any good to pick up either of these two options. But if for some reason he ends up missing time, then we definitely should be keeping an eye on these guys coming out of this game against Detroit. So I just want to bring them up again so they're on your radar. Are we picking them up right now? No, unless we're in like super deep leagues. But keep them on your radar just in case we do need to add them later in the week if Mike Evans isn't ready to go. Josh Palmer also coming out of the bye this week. He's a big play threat for the Los Angeles Chargers. And in this matchup this week, going up against the Dallas Cowboys, there's going to be a great opportunity to drive the ball down the field. If that happens, Josh Palmer could be on the receiving end a couple big plays. Now, maybe he isn't going to be the safest option for you this week, but I definitely like him over guys like Quentin Johnson and Gerald Everett in that offense. DJ Chark isn't getting a ton of volume right now, but he's scoring 2 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Bryce Young is looking his way. When they can find some plays where he can go deep, he's looking to DJ Chark. He's kind of the deep threat. And given the fact that Carolina is playing from behind a lot of the time, that's just more opportunity for DJ Chark. Again, not a consistent option, but definitely a decent upside play if you're looking for help. A lot of people panic dropped Josh Reynolds when it was announced that Jameson Williams would be returning from his suspension early. But like I talked about with Jameson Williams last week, it's probably going to be a few weeks before we really start to see him get going, and the Lions have even said he's going to be on a snap count to start. So because of that and the injuries to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Reynolds is still a really solid option as one of the most trusted options in this offense for Jared Goff. Now, if Amon-Ra St. Brown comes back this week against Tampa Bay, Josh Reynolds is likely the number 3 option between him and then Sam Laporta, of course, who's lighting it up right now, and then Josh Reynolds would be number 3. So there may not be a ton of upside for him given that he won't get a ton of volume, but the chance to score a touchdown is going to be very high for him every single week. Over the last 2 weeks, Curtis Samuel has 15 targets. That's more than Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin in this offense. You've seen it over the last 2 weeks as well with Sam Howell. He's been a little bit careless with the football, making some plays down the field that maybe were not warranted. It feels like this past week he's tried to take a little bit of a step back and he's just trying to play a little bit smarter. And because of that, we could see Curtis Samuel keep up this target share moving forward. In the games that Gardner Minshew has quarterbacked a significant portion of the time, Josh Downs has seen 19 targets. And because of that, he is going to be a really good PPR option while Anthony Richardson is on the mend from his shoulder sprain. Now, early returns say that it could be a few weeks for Anthony Richardson, so Gardner Minshew will step into the starting spotlight at that point. Who knows when Richardson will be back, so right now, let's go ahead and grab Josh Downs, and he could be a nice wide receiver 3 option for those of you that play in deeper starting leagues. Nelson Agholor, not a bad week last week. He's not doing anything to blow the doors off, but another 64 yards, definitely showing that he's being trusted in this offense. And OBJ is banged up again. The dude just has not been able to stay healthy. Nelson Aguilar continues to find ways to stay on the field, and with us going into some big bye weeks, he could find some ways into our lineup as well. This past week, both Tank Dell and Robert Woods were banged up, so we're going to want to keep an eye on John Mechie this coming week to see how these other guys are healing up and if they will be able to play. If for any reason Tank Dell or Robert Woods are going to be out next week, John Mechie could be a big play opportunity for us, for somebody that needs some upside out there. He's not very safe, and he's definitely going to be a risk, but he has the speed and the burst to maybe rip off a big touchdown for us. Since Wan'Dale Robinson returned from the IR, the last 2 weeks he has seen 11 targets so far this season. Definitely a big uptick in terms of him being the potential #1 wide receiver in terms of volume for the rest of the season. And Daniel Jones is dealing with an issue with his neck right now, so there's a possibility that Tyrod Taylor could be the starting quarterback, and if that happens, I think Wan'Dale Robinson could end up being his #1 target moving forward over the next couple of weeks. Trent Irwin, I'm only keeping an eye on in super deep PPR leagues, but he did have 10 targets this past week, and if T. Higgins doesn't play, he's definitely a guy that's seeing a decent amount of looks playing in his stead. So definitely not a guy, again, that I'm running out and adding right away, unless I'm in like a 14 or 16 team PPR league, and I'm going to be looking for like a wide receiver 3 or a double flex option over the next couple of weeks. KJ Osborne might be one of the most important adds at the wide receiver position, especially for you Justin Jefferson owners. Right now, we don't have a big word on what could happen with Justin Jefferson. We know that he's dealing with a hamstring injury, but we don't know if it's going to be anything that's going to cause him to miss multiple weeks or maybe just be limited. So KJ Osborne, who's been significantly dropped since the beginning of the season, needs to be added up right now. There's only 3 tight ends that I'm looking at this week, and 2 of them are playing in this same game with Jonnu Smith and Logan Thomas. And then we're going to toss Dalton Schultz in here as well, since he's played a lot better over the last couple of weeks. The safest add out of all of these players is definitely going to be Jonnu Smith. He continues to get a ton of looks at the tight end position, and even Kyle Pitts, who had a good week this past week, finally, Jonnu Smith still saw plenty of targets. He's being looked at by Desmond Ridder continuously, and actually, given the fact that he's seeing so many targets, he's a pretty safe option to start at the tight end position right now. Logan Thomas's volume last week was really driven by the fact that Washington went down, they went down big, and they went down fast, and because of that, they were throwing the ball a little bit more. Now, if they continue to have that happen, then Logan Thomas becomes a guy that has touchdown potential every single week. It feels like Sam Howell is looking his way quite a bit when we get into the red zone, and because of that, he's absolutely a guy to keep on our radar. He's going to be a low-end tight end 1 every single week because he's not going to see a ton of volume with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel all getting looks, plus throwing a little Antonio Gibson when they use him. But if he brings that touchdown upside, he definitely is a guy that we should consider if we don't have any better options. And Dalton Schultz, after back-to-back really good weeks, I think he's made his way back into the starting conversation. He really disappeared the first 2 weeks of the season, but also keep in mind that Robert Woods and Tank Dell both got hurt this past week. And after they went down, Dalton Schultz still saw quite a bit of targets. So because of that, we're going to be cautious with Dalton Schultz. We're not going to run out there and spend a bunch of fab or think that he's going to be our starting tight end moving forward, but we are still going to keep an eye on him, especially if those guys cannot go this week. All right, let's take a look at some streaming options at the quarterback position. And it might be crazy to say, but Desmond Ridder going up against Washington this week is a decent streaming option. Washington has allowed the 3rd most passing yards and the 3rd most passing touchdowns on defense this year. Desmond Ridder is going to bring risks, especially if he throws some interceptions. But this week, given the matchup, he also might bring a little bit of upside as well. And for Bryce Young this week, I'm adding him as an option based purely on the fact that he's probably going to throw the football quite a bit. I could see Miami beating the brakes off of Carolina this week and putting them behind for a majority of the game. So more than likely, we're going to see Bryce Young throwing and throwing quite a bit. If you're looking for somebody to replace, let's say like Jordan Love, who's going to be on his bye this week, this is definitely a really good opportunity for you. All right, now if you're looking to stream some defensive special teams this week, number one for me is going to be Atlanta going up against Washington. Sam Howell's been pretty prone to turnovers the last couple of weeks, and because of that, Atlanta's secondary is definitely going to have a good opportunity to score you some points on that end of the football. Now, their defense doesn't look great all the time, but they have looked solid, and as long as Washington plays like they did last week, Atlanta's defense is going to be in the clear. But if Washington offense shows up, that could end up being a problem. I've been talking about Jacksonville's defense for the last couple of weeks and how underrated they are, and they went toe-to-toe with Buffalo's offense in London this past week. And now they're going to get a Colts offense that's going to be without Anthony Richardson. With as good as they are against the run and as well as they've done recently with turnovers, this is definitely a really good streaming option for us. All right, I got a few players that you may not be dropping as of right now, but we're definitely going to be getting close to it, and Dalvin Cook is going to be the first one. Definitely hasn't done much of anything, and even as the backup this week to Breece Hall, who had lost some of his snap count finally, Dalvin Cook didn't do anything in the few touches that he got. It definitely doesn't look like he has the explosiveness that he did last season, and he's definitely way behind Breece Hall in that area. If they truly are taking the wheels off of Breece Hall and they're saying have at it now, then Breece Hall will be the guy and Dalvin Cook will be a thing of the past very soon. You may not want to drop Tutu Atwell right now and really keep an eye on Cooper Kupp over the next couple of weeks to make sure he doesn't re-aggravate anything. But if Cooper Kupp stays healthy, Tutu Atwell is going to be a guy that loses all of the upside that he's had to begin the season. He's just not going to get it with Puka and Cooper Kupp being the number 1 and 2 guys in that offense. And then you throw in Kyren Williams and Tyler Higbee, Tutu Atwell will be reliant on a touchdown every single week. Samaje Perine, I talked about it with McLaughlin earlier. Samaje Perine has been unseated. McLaughlin is now the number 2 running back in this offense. If he wasn't, he wouldn't have taken a majority of the snaps this week. Right now, Samaje Perine really is just a role player in this Broncos offense that is super inconsistent as it is anyway. So for your fantasy team, there just isn't any upside or potential there, even if you needed to start him. And finally, Odell Beckham Jr., if you're still holding on to him at this point, we can go ahead and be done. That experiment in Baltimore just isn't quite working out. Zay Flowers is the guy. You still have Mark Andrews. Nelson Aguilar is playing well. You're still running the football a lot. OBJ just cannot stay healthy, so his opportunity just isn't there. There you have it, Headliner Nation, my waiver wire targets heading into week 6 of the NFL season. Make sure you hit that like button for me. Make sure you subscribe if you're new here. But of course, leave me a comment down below. If there's a player in the drop section that you didn't see that you're thinking about dropping, let me know who you want to drop and who you want to pick up, and I'll hit you with either a yes or a no to kind of help you make that decision. Everybody have a great rest of the day. I'll see you in the start and sit shows later in the week. Peace out, stay safe, and stay healthy, and I'll catch y'all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.